Hey, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas. It's Saturday morning, my friend, and you are listening to Light Talk.
Well, good morning. This is Stan. Once again, twice in a row, coming to you from Gainesville, Florida. And today we're going to discuss letters of recommendation, white, gray, or black projection screens, how to negotiate a fee, and making a fog juice cocktail, all on Light Talk.
And this is David coming to you from the beautiful Belmont Shore neighborhood of Long Beach, California. And if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers.
Is that Long Beach?
Is
that beach long?
Long Beach. Welcome, everyone, to episode 267. And we have a lot to get to today, including our review of the new Cyberlight LED. But first, news. Yes, there's lots of news coming to you. And first of all, we have a winner. Ding, 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 ding. Our Alice Quote Competition of the Week winner. And I don't think we'll have a second one of these, but we have one this year.
You want a drum roll? I can do a drum roll. Are you ready?
Yeah. Where'd you do that drum roll?
On my desk.
Oh, on your desk.
Good.
Okay.
It's very expensive dress.
Okay, there you go. So, Marina Soto of Santa Fe, New Mexico, correctly identified the quote, casserole of nonsense, which we said twice during last week's episode.
Tasty, very tasty.
Which actually describes our show quite well.
That's true. We are a casserole.
We are a casserole.
That's good.
Marina, expect your double shot of ready for dishwasher Light Talk shot glasses.
Can I get one too? Because I don't have one.
You don't have one? I have like a box full of them.
Well, I'd like one.
All right. I mean, they really are the swag of Light Talk.
I know. I have the coffee mug. It's in a very special place, but I don't
but the coffee
have...
mugs... I don't know. I think we did wrong with that.
I think I missed the LDI when you gave out the shot glasses, I think.
Well, we did it like 2 years, but that's all right. You may have missed both those years. Last week, and no one knew this. I just happened to be on our...
You stumbled into it.
And I stumbled into it, that we have crossed our next milestone of 300,000 downloads. 300,000. Do you believe that?
I think our bribery has worked.
On who?
The people that we make listen to this show. Don't we send them checks? Oh, no, we send them shot glasses.
Yeah, we send them shot glasses. All right. So, yes, 300,000. We're actually at 302,000 right now.
But do they listen? Just because they download doesn't mean they listen.
That's true. This week, Tony Award nominations were announced. Best lighting design of a play, we have Joshua Carr for Hangman, Yeong Chang for Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough. Remember that show?
Yep.
That was a good show.
I know Entasaki Sange. I have a whole story there.
That's a great show. And I'm glad that they're reviving really good shows like that. John Clark for the Layman trilogy, Jane Cox for Macbeth, which I do want to see, and Yi Zhao, and I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Yi, and I apologize if I screwed up. Chow, is it? Yi Chow?
I have a colleague with the same last name.
Oh, then it's probably Chow.
His Jing Zhao.
But this is Yi Chow. The Skin of Our Teeth. You talk about another great revival. There you go. That's another great show. And quite apropos for what we're going through now. And now on the musical side of things, we have Neil Austin for Company, another great show. Tim Dealing for Six, the musical, which I saw pre-Broadway on a cruise ship. that was a whole nother story. But yeah, so Six, the musical. Donald Holder, our friend, for Paradise Square. Natasha Katz, another Light Talk friend, for MJ. Bradley King for Flying Over Sunset. And Jen Shriver for A Strange Loop. So congratulations to all the nominees. And good luck to all of you. I think just being nominated is fantastic. I've never been nominated for a Tony. Have you, Stan or Steve?
No.
In my dreams. In my dreams.
I don't think so. So let's get started. Steve has our first question of the day.
It comes from Sam in the Peach State. And down in Georgia, he writes, I need to stretch my budget. Can I dilute my fog juice with water? Well,
this sounds like a new drink.
I mean, sure, you can dilute it with water, beer, milk. You know, you can do it. You can do anything. You can put cow piss in it. Do you want
cow piss? The duck flies down.
Yes, we'll hear more about that tasty beverage later today. But yeah, sure, you can do anything you want to do. The thing you got to keep in mind is, are you about to destroy your $3 or $4 or $5,000 hazer? So I think the first question before you start experimenting is to call the manufacturer of your hazer up and say, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you guys think? And then,
Are you crazy?
and if you can dilute it with water, they'll tell you. Fog juice, there's only two things in fog juice: glycerin, and you can get that at your pharmacy, and water. But it's a special water. It's distilled water. You don't want to put tap water into your, if you're going to cut your fog juice, you don't want to put tap water in there. You want to stick with the two ingredients, distilled water and glycerin. I looked this up, and I take no responsibility for this, but I found a site called Stage Bibles. And Stage Bibles is, it looks like a DJ site, and they talk about this very thing. And they actually give recipes for fog juice on here to make your own. And so they say 65% distilled water and 35% glycerin for very thick fog. 75 to 80% water with 25 to 20% glycerin, regular fog. And if you want really light fog, just a bit of haze, 85 to 90% water with 15 to 10% glycerin. So this works somewhere in some machine somehow. But again, I would call the manufacturer up before you void a warranty and you save a couple bucks and destroy, an expensive fog machine. David, what about you guys in California? Do you put water in your fog juice?
We put the lime in the coconut, drink it all up. Okay, well, drinking it, I don't know, man. All I can tell you is that if you start using stuff that they don't recommend, I would bet your warranty is voided. So I would be very careful about putting anything into a hazer that people can actually breathe and die from. So you don't want to be doing that. Just buy the stuff that the manufacturer recommends. Stay out of that litigation. You don't need it.
I feel like you're taking your heart medication and cutting the pill in half and asking if there would be a bad result from that.
Or taking your dog's medication instead. You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. You don't want to take, dilute it with water. I don't know, man. I just don't know. What do you think, Stan?
I would say, I'm with David, use what the manufacturer prescribes. Save your shekels and buy the real stuff.
Shekels. That's biblical. We're going back to
still use shekels. Shekels are still available in Israel.
Are they really?
I would think so.
I didn't know that. Oh, shekels.
I thought they went to Bitcoin.
Yeah. Let's get started with Bitcoin.
I think shekels just sounds funny. It's a good word. It's a fun word to say, shekels. Shekels.
It's a shekel. It's a shekel.
It's a funny word to say.
Okay, so John from Topeka, Kansas asks, I am serving on a hiring committee for a new design professor.
Sorry for you.
I have read dozens of letters of recommendations for the candidates, and they all seem to say the same thing. This person is exceptional, one of the top 5% of all the designers I've worked with. The same goes when I interview graduate students. Am I wasting my time? Well, it's funny we got this letter in because today I just read an article. Actually, it was an op-ed or it was...
It was in the Chronicle. You sent it to me. It was in the Chronicle.
About how letters of recommendation are a waste of time. They're meaningless. And when you think about it, they really are.
I vehemently disagree. I'm going to take the opposite side of this.
What this writer said, and I totally agree with, Stan disagrees, obviously, is that you write a letter, you got to be real careful because usually if someone asks me to write a letter and I don't feel I can write a good letter, I tell them, no, I really can't write this letter. You just got to be truthful because otherwise you're lying or you're writing some letter that's getting around the point that this person is mediocre or bad. It puts everybody in a difficult position, and I don't think it really tells you anything. So, Stan, I'm really curious to hear your counterpoint to my point.
So I read that article, the English professor from wherever he teaches, and he makes some points. I'm not going to argue that there's some truth in the article. But I'm going to say this. So there's a lot of bad letters of recommendation that are worthless. I will agree. I don't write those. And I think that they do serve a purpose at a very fundamental level. And you kind of made my point, David, by saying you choose not to write a letter if you don't feel like you can recommend the person. And I think that's correct. Or you could write a letter with one sentence that says, "Just call me if you really want to know." But I think when a letter is what he doesn't do in the article is he doesn't offer an alternative. So if you're going to say this needs to be replaced with a better or newer system, okay, fine. So he does a very good job of attacking the weaknesses or the things that you could sort of lampoon a letter with, and some of that's valid, but he doesn't offer an alternative. So I think when someone takes the time or agrees to write a letter for someone for a particular job, that is a commitment of time. And so that says something right there. Now, I still write letters, and I still would like to, in a faculty search, we had this happen this year where a couple of searches were conducted, and I'm not on the search committee. So we get the materials. So I get a resume, right? And I get a portfolio, and and I might not be able to meet them personally. So I have nothing subjective by which to make the judgment. Everything is objective. A letter has a certain level of subjectivity, and I think you need both. So I don't agree with that. I don't think I would be ready to let them go if the very opinionated writer of that article had an alternative, but he does not. He doesn't offer one. So what is the alternative? And I'll say one last thing. If somebody asks me for a generic letter of recommendation, I'm reluctant to do that because that's what he's talking about. Letters that are boilerplate, okay, those are pretty much useless. I would agree. But if somebody is applying for a job at SMU as a set designer, and I worked with them, I'm going to write a letter to SMU about their work as a set designer. It's going to be very specific. But these generic things, I would agree, are fairly useless. So it just depends. And I think the ones that really matter is when the letter is written. And sometimes job application advertisements will say 3 letters of reference written specifically for this position. And that's a different animal.
The problems with the letters of recommendation start with who's making the recommendation. Quite often, at least in the university world, when letters do come for recommendation for tenure or for promotion, there is a veta on the person who is writing the letter that also shows up. So on some level, the letters are curated, but I think where the professor at University of Pennsylvania is making his point is that a lot of these letters are simply cut and paste letters. And people take one person's name out and put one other person's name in. And he also goes on to, has every student you've had, start looking back over the letters you've written. Is every student in the top 5%? Is every student fantastic? Does every student have a work ethic far beyond their years? What are we saying about these people? And there is simply, at some point, the truth is the last thing we're saying. So I agree with David. I have a tendency not to agree to write a letter for recommendation unless, I've got to be really motivated to do it. Because sometimes we'll take a student. Sometimes a student will say, write me a letter of recommendation. And that student has graduated 15 years ago. Well, that's a very different person today than he or she was 15 years ago when I saw them every day in class. And I tell the students that. I say, I can't really comment on your work. It looks like your career is going fine, and yes, it's great that you're working at XYZ theaters. You clearly are doing the right things. But I can't really write you a letter. The directors you're working with now, that artistic director, that producer, those people who know who you are today can do such a better job than I can. Because mine is simply a reflection of who you were at a different point in your life. I think letters of recommendation have gotten out of control. Something has to replace them. I don't have a good solution right now, but I think the meat of the argument from this professor at the University of Pennsylvania is responsibility. And at some point, you have to say, no, I can't. Or at some point, you have to be honest. And then we start worrying about being honest. You know what? Florida has the sunshine laws, so anybody can read anything at any time about anyone else. So am I going to write a letter for someone at Florida? I did it one time. I wrote a letter for Stan, and it was an honest letter, and I didn't care if he read it or not.
And he got the job anyway.
And he got the job anyhow. But, you know, we live in a world of lawsuits, and how dare you say these things about me? It's becoming difficult.
I think both of you missed reading between the lines of that article, because what his point was is that the thing to do is to do your due diligence when it comes to, watching the person teach, looking at their research, whether it be, designs that they've done or plays that they've written. This is why I feel so strongly about it, because I know that a lot of these letters are written because the person feels an obligation to write them. And I agree with Stan. I do not write a letter of recommendation unless it's going to be a good one. And also, I ask the person, okay, send me the job description.
Sure, yeah.
Because I want to make sure that letter addresses the qualities that they are looking for. And if they don't, I will not write the letter.
Yeah, I said you tailor the letter to the job. Yeah,
those are really good letters. However, most letters of recommendation aren't like that. They don't take the type of effort that the three of us may take when we take it very seriously. And therefore, it really makes the process kind of meaningless and a waste of time. So, and I agree with you, Stan, phone interviews are really important. And instead of letters of references, just ask for references and their phone numbers.
Yeah, we do that too.
I think you learn a lot more from talking to somebody than you do from paper, because you can ask that person specific questions and follow-up questions about the suitability of the candidate for the job, and you can tell when they're hedging.
Absolutely. All right, I've got an interesting one, which might garner some conversation. Carl over in Minnesota Nice asks, do you have any tips on negotiating fees for your work? I got a bunch. I have one tip. So you should know what you're worth. You should have a template or a spreadsheet where you sort of have phases of work and you know what your hourly wants to be. And David and I were talking about this earlier. Like he was mentioning to me that in Europe, the way the fees work for entertainment or for arts is that there's a fee for the art, and then there's a separate amount for, what did you call it, David?
The work.
The work,
being there,
right. Yeah, the art and being there, the work involved. And so in the field that I work in now in theater consulting, there's a fee for what they consider the work product, as it might be called, and then there's an overhead. And in some an overhead are things like, transportation, electricity, insurance, you name it, paper, postage, whatever it might be, trips to the site. And actually some clients, the municipal clients, in the spreadsheet, they send me a spreadsheet, and it's like, fill in your hourly and then fill in your overhead. And they say overhead cannot exceed 2% of your fee, and then it automatically calculates it. So there's a recognition that there is the work, and then there is the overhead. And then sometimes when I put a fee together, I sort of anticipate there's going to be a back and forth negotiation. And sometimes I just put in what I think is a fair price based on what is, I hate to use this term, standard in the industry, or what would be normal, or within the spectrum of acceptability. And sometimes there's always going to be a comeback with, can you cut 10%? Can you cut 5%? And occasionally, like recently, maybe I left some money on the table, as it said, is I put in what I thought was a fair fee, but a little less than a fair fee because it was a religious school organization. So I tend to discount that a little bit, and no one came back with any cuts. It was like a very fast negotiation, and it was like, we're all good with that number, and when can you start? So I think the tip is to think about those two pieces, the work and the overhead. Have a sense of your worth in your field, and recognize that for theater artists, in our field is one thing, There's a union that's going to set certain baseline minimums. And then some of us work outside of our field, and that where I would just tell you optimistically, outside of the arts industry with the skill sets we have, we actually have a higher value. So talk to other people who may have done that and get some sense of where the scales are, where the spectrum is, and listen, and then listen carefully to what people tell you.
When I started, I would look at the overall budget of the theater, and I would look at the type of people they were hiring to work at the theater, and then I would look at where the USA minimums are, and I would kind of put all that together and start chatting with them. I mean, there used to be a theater in New York. It was a small theater, and it was in the ABCs, and their operating budget for a year was $30,000. So you go into that knowing what the limitations are. So you don't walk in there and say, I need a $2,000 design fee because they can't afford it. But I look at time on location. How long am I going to be there? What do I have to do? If I'm going to be remote somewhere, I just did a thing for a television thing for a church out west, and so I'm looking at my design fee, and on top of that, I'm looking on the expenses that's required. I'm adding into that clearly hotel. I'm adding into that per diem. I'm adding into that a car. So I just kind of look at the overall, what's it going to cost to do this project, and saying here is the thing, and then I usually break it out for them and say this is what it is.
To Steve's point about the budget of the theater, in the architecture world, an architect is good. Usually these projects come with an overall budget. So if it's a $10 million project, an architect might see 2%, 3% of the gross cost of the project. And the consultants, I might look at a project and go, okay, this is the X number of millions. What tiny little piece of that should be my design? And it's a percentage. And those have sort of acceptable numbers that are commonly known. But it's based on, like saying, okay, the theater has a gross yearly income of this. Okay, the project usually has a budget, and then what piece of that budget is your participation, going to be valued as a percentage of the overall cost.
It's interesting because in the theater world, we have the LORT groups of A, B, C, D, and all that's usually dependent upon yearly budget and also audience size and things like that. But there's still a wide variety where Ken Billington would make a lot more money than I would make on a show.
That's prestige,
Even that's the cost of prestige and also the cost of talent. There's no doubt that Ken is a lot more talented than I am and certainly a lot more experienced. So he deserves more money. I have no problem with that at all. But the key is how can you maximize your fee?
Your value. Knowing your value.
Yeah, knowing your value, but also, like Steve says, knowing what that company can afford. So, and also there are things like, are you friends with the people? I mean, are you friends with the producers or the general directors? I've had a very easy time of negotiating fees after 20 years at Central City because I'm really close with all these people. And I know they would not cheat me. I would know that they would pay me as much as they can afford. Now, that's rare when that happens.
That's rare. That's a very nice situation to be in.
Yeah, that is a nice situation because I don't have an agent in the United States. I have an agent for Europe and for Asia, but I don't have an agent for North America. If they offer you money, they offer you a fee, and you think that your fee needs to be higher, ask for it and say, listen, I normally work for this amount of money, for doing a show of this scale. Is there any way you can come up with an extra $1,000 or whatever? Because a lot of it is set that way. I know I get a certain amount of money for revivals. I know I get a certain amount of money for new productions. And therefore, I work from there. And if for that size theater, for that size of production or that type of production, then I pretty much know what's going on. And also, who am I working with? I'm working with people I'm going to have a good time with? Absolutely. I may work there for very little money.
There's something you left out. And so I'm going to pick on Ken Billington.
Don't pick. He's not here to defend himself.
Well,
I'll play Ken.
I think he might be the first to agree with me. Okay, you got to hear me out. I don't know that Ken Billington's any more talented than you are. Ken Billington, unlike you, has a record of bringing home multi-million-dollar shows for a producer. So a producer says, I've got X amount of dollars. Let's say the number is 20,000 and a percentage of the show. Am I going to hire a known quantity? Am I going to hire a Don Holder or a Justin Townsend? You pick them. You pick those 10 or 12 designers who are really working on Broadway. And they have proven year after year after year they can manage the budget, bring home the show, get it done on time. And I'm not saying you can't, but if I'm a producer, I'm not going to Vegas to bet or to gamble. I'm going there because I know you can bring the show in 14 days.
I think we were on the same wavelength, but in a similar way. I was going to take the opposite of what David was saying about all his warm, fuzzy stuff, which is great. But at the same time, there's this thing about intuiting how much they want you. And I think there is, to your point, Steve, that risk aversion of the producer, knowing that this guy can do it. Producers are risk averse. Actually, human beings are generally risk averse. Okay, so there's that feature, and if you can intuit that, they want you because you're going to be less risky for them, or you feel that you're the one that they want, then you're in a good, strong negotiating position. Not to say you should exploit that terribly, but knowing that, I think, is important. That happens to me. It's like there's not a lot of people in this state that do what I do. And I'm at the point now where I do it pretty well. And that's sort of out there. So if they're coming to me, I have a sense that they want me. My reputation is now preceding me. So that's something to be aware of in the negotiating process. And Ken, if they're coming to Ken, he knows they want Ken. He knows that.
Look at the people who are doing the monster rock and roll tours. Look at Harry Styles. That new world tour, that designer brought it home. Look at the Super Bowl. Look at the Olympics. These are, we just talked to someone.
Kurt, yeah.
This is someone who has proven over the years he can bring it home, and he does. So of course they go back to them.
You are listening to Light Talk, and today we are sponsored by
Pet Sweat of Japan. How many times have you wrapped up a late night 10 out of 12, begun the drive home, and thought, man, I'm hungry? If you're like me, plenty. But as we all know, the food pickings are pretty slim after midnight. That's why Pet Sweat of Japan offers the Lampy Yum Yum box. Unlike the traditional bento box of rice, meat, pickled vegetables, the Lampy Yum Yum box is targeted to the working men and women of the American theater. The Lampy Yum Yum box is crafted with care, an inexpensive, wholesome, nutritious meal with a variety of taste, textures, and food groups. We now have 3 regional boxes. First, the Deep South Gutbuster. Pork rinds, grits, deep-fried butter, and a can of PBR. I dare you to eat it after midnight. The Midwest Puppy Chow. Olive loaf, spray cheese, Jell-O salad, and you don't need a pop because we have public bubblers, don't you know? More fun than a sack of truss monkeys in your pocket. Finally, David's favorite, the California Dreaming, Spam Musabi, dried kudzu, pizzle soup, and a shot of wheatgrass. Dress up as Oscar Wilde and sing Noel Coward songs all the way home. You'll never have to go to 7-Eleven for fine cuisine again. Ask about our Tech Week special. Order all 3 Lampy Yum Yum boxes, and Pet Sweat of Japan will toss in a tasty 6-pack of cow piss. Pet Sweat of Japan. Always something good in the kitchen.
And now I'm heading to the restroom. Oh, excuse me. And now, back to Light Talk.
The sound of those rabid ducks tells us that once again it's time for Let's Talk About. And today's Let's Talk About is all about the new Cyberlight. That's right, boys and girls.
Cyber, is that like some kind of new warfare?
No, Cyberlight. You know this better than
I remember them.
The 3 of us. They're wonderful lights that were out.
Big
they were
and heavy.
They're big and heavy. They were moving mirrors. They were scanners. They're like the super scanner, although they're not as big as the Telescan. I think the Telescan may have been the largest scanner.
Clay Paky had Golden Scan and Silverado Scan, and I don't know
but
what
they
weren't
had. As big as the Telescan. The Telescan was, I think, the largest.
those
They were
were
like refrigerators.
They were, didn't Mark use them on Pink Floyd or something?
Yes. He put that searchlight, that helicopter searchlight in them. And they were really powerful lights. But the Cyberlight was a great light. I think it used a 2,000 watt MSR lamp, and it was very powerful, especially for the time.
Litho patterns, fantastic litho patterns.
Beautiful litho patterns. And they kind of just went away when high-end sort of started doing moving head fixtures.
After the Verilight patent expired.
Yeah, that's a whole nother story, long story about that. But yeah, they stopped making them. But a lot of companies use them. I mean, Disney bought a bunch of them and used them in a lot of their attractions. A lot of these arenas that have like hockey teams and basketball teams, they installed them in their big arenas because they were, long throw instruments.
Yeah.
And even I used them.
I use them on industrials. I use them on industrial shows.
No, I would use them in shows. I would put them up on their ends in box booms and use them as a great box boom light. Instead of hanging, 12 Lecos, I'd put one Cyberlight up there, and it did everything a Leco could ever do and more.
And fast.
Because the mirrors were fantastic. But they were great lights. But before we get started, a special thank you to our friends Bruce Jordahl and Terry Heisler of High End Systems to arrange a private demo for me of the Cyberlight. And while I was there, we also looked at the Lone Star, which you'll be hearing about soon, is a very surprising light, especially for its price point. But first, what the three of us old dudes have been waiting for, the rebirth of the Cyberlight.
The scanner, we've been talking about it for 3 years.
Scanners are kind of back, but this is kind of cool because it's retro. And I love retro. I love everything. I love old cars. I love old organs. I love
That's why he loves me.
I love Stan. I love Steve. I mean, I love old things. It's like Grandpa. He would always drive in that old Model A Ford, right? Now we're driving a Model A type Cyberlight that's actually brought into the 21st century. So let me give you some really quick specs. It's got a high CRI of 91. This lamp, it's a single color, and it's heavy on the red, which helps the skin tones. It produces 12,750 lumens. The original was around 13,000 lumens, so that's pretty much, comparable as far as intensity. It uses that long internal zoom range, which equals good gobomorphing, and that's like a 10 to 28 degree zoom range. It uses great laser-etched color flags. It's got a variable CTO. It's got a terrific indigo color. That's basically what sold Cirque du Soleil on the light. They bought a bunch of them. But what I love the Cybers more than anything else were the amazing gobos. They have 2 rotating gobo wheels, 7 gobos each. A great selection of original and new gobos, breakups. They have the great iconic Cyberlight gobos of like the Techno Wedge and the Chiclets, things that I remember when I was like 30 years ago. It was fantastic. They have a 4-facet prism. They have a light and heavy frost, which is really impressive, I must say. However, true to the original nature of the Cyberlight, it doesn't have an animation wheel. But you kind of don't need an animation wheel with the Cyberlight because you could do some amazing effects just by morphing gobos together. The light was extremely bright. It was certainly as bright as it was before. The quality of the light was absolutely stunning. Beautiful, beautiful flesh tones, a really strong, even field. And it was just very impressive. It looked just like an old Cyberlight without all the problems that the old Cyberlight had, like the lamp changing color or maybe flickering or dying. And also it was just a nice steady light. It was just beautiful. The colors on the light were stunning. Great fading from color to color using their flags. The color wheels had a really good selection. It was just beautiful light. Throughout the entire zoom range, it was gorgeous. The list price is $12,500.
I think it's great. I wish the price point was a little bit lower for a couple of projects where I might want to put it.
How noisy is it?
Oh, it's quiet. It's really super quiet.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's super quiet.
Well, there you go. I mean, churches, houses of worship,
Sure.
TV studios, they're going to love this thing.
Yeah, it's going out on rock tours too. There are several tours that are using it right now. It's going to be a very popular light. It is already, which is, may not be for theater, but I'm sure I'll throw them in the box.
I can see it as a diagonal backlight in a theater for sure.
Yeah. The thing is, though, it's only a 28 degree.
That's the thing. So
spread.
I can't use. Well, they showed a picture of it on the website in a front of house position, saying that it's more stealth because the way you could hang it, you wouldn't have a moving yoke popping down. And this seems to have the good color rendering that I would want to have in Florida, where we have such a range of flesh tones. But I'd have to be a pretty far back position at 28 degrees. That might work.
They don't have to build one light to do everything. This is a bag of golf clubs, and this is a golf club they felt they needed, given the other product line that they have already out there.
Like the Lone Star.
Yeah, the Lone Star, in fact, which is I am plopping them down in light plots in high schools right now, but I'm concerned about the CRI, so I've got an order in to look at that because that works good for me in on those projects. In other projects, Professional Roadhouse, I've got a different set of fixtures, but I don't understand why I would get the high CRI in the Cyberlight and not give me the same CRI in the Lone Star.
Probably has to do with the LED engine and cost.
The Lone Star is a 7,000 K native color temperature, but I haven't seen that on the Cyber.
But let's talk about the Lone Star because a lot of our listeners don't know what we're talking about.
Right.
The Lone Star came out last year, and they said that it is the most popular selling light right now at high end.
It's got a lot.
It's got so much going for it. First of all, it's small.
Yep.
It's amazingly small.
50 pounds, right?
It weighs 50 pounds, which sounds like a lot, but it's really small. It's so small that if you hang this sucker on a pipe and it's pointing straight down and you have a source 4 next to it, the source 4 is going to be longer than this light. And you can hang this light on 18-inch centers. I think this is the only moving light in its class, at least, or above, that you could hang on an 18-inch center with another moving light.
And get the full pan and tilt without banging into each other. It's got everything my solar theaters have in it for for a fraction of the size and a fraction of the price.
Pretty much. And it's got everything. It's got the animation wheels. It's got the gobo wheels.
Full wipe shutters.
It's got full wipe shutters. And this light retails for $6,850. That is amazing.
This is what Steve's dream. Steve said this like a while back. There's going to be a $5,000 moving head that everybody's going to love. And the person that hits that light's going to blow up the market. I think he was right.
Also, this light has two separate prisms. You could use them both at the same time. One's like a horizontal prism, and the other one's like I think a 4-facet or 5-facet prism.
No, I think they've clearly made a good light, and particularly I think a good light for probably television studios.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and speaking of television studios, they have an adjustable fan on that thing.
On the Lone Star?
Yeah, on the Lone Star. So it has a studio mode where you could actually shut the fan off. And it's got this step-down type of procedure if the light gets too hot, if you're in studio mode, and it will bring the intensity down a bit. But it's very quiet.
When you have an LED, when you have anything, and you shut all the fans down, you're asking a lot from the engineering department. It's like your light went from a Nova to like, what happened?
It depends also what your air conditioning setup. If it's like 30 degrees in that place,
I think if you have a $6,000 light, I think people can just suck it up and have a little fan noise.
Yeah, what's the big deal?
What is the big deal at that point?
All right. Well, those are two exciting new products from High End. And thank you very much for showing them to us. It was great. Bruce and Terry was on his way to the airport.
Yeah, Bruce, if you're listening, I need a demo here in Gainesville.
Bruce is great. Both these guys. Bruce is a great musician, by the way.
I know that.
Knew that.
I do know
still
that.
trying to get in his band.
Practice.
Too bad. Practice. So Steve has the last question of the day.
Sure. It is Mary in Spain, and she writes, can you discuss the pros and cons of projector screens? White, black, and gray. All right. So, I am not a projection designer, but I can give you the little bit that I know. White's nice. It reflects light well, doesn't alter the projected image. You can get a screen that has like a little micro perforations in it, and so you can pop a speaker behind there. So white is nice. White does have some problems, though. The thing that makes it nice, this big reflectivity, also makes it bad. So they reflect light off the screen onto the set, onto the floor. So that reflection means you have to be pretty surgical if you're going to use a white screen. Also, with a white screen, what I have seen, I'm sorry Zach's not here, but he'll probably chime in online, it's hard to get a high contrast image up there. You know, the blacks become difficult to produce with a projector unless you're using a pretty high-end projector. So if we're using something mere mortals use, you might be upset with that. And clearly, white is also going to wash out. I think black is a lot better. It certainly is better at reproducing the darker portions of your image. So that means the contrast is going to be better. Black screens don't reflect as much light as the white screens do, so I think they perform better with ambient lighting on stage. So a black screen, I think, simply gives you a sharper image, better blacks than a white screen is going to do. Black screens also are not perfect. Black screens can at times give you a bit of a rainbow or shimmer effect from the projector. Black screens can be prone to a hot spot where one section of the screen is slightly brighter than everything else. Now you can control both of these by using your projector and adjusting your projector's brightness settings. But, you know, again, there's a trade-off there. Gray screens, sometimes they're called high contrast screens. They have similar qualities that a black screen will have. So a gray screen is going to be better than a white screen, I think, but not as good as a black screen. The gray screen is going to absorb ambient light that strikes it better than a white screen does. You know, the main complaint, from what I hear in my little narrow world about gray screens, is that they give everything you watch kind of a grayish tint to it, and they're vulnerable to being washed out. I think the bigger question you should ask yourself is, do you want a rear screen or a front projection screen? I don't know. What do you guys? You guys used white, gray, and black screens?
I use all three. and various shades between black and white, and then lots of shades of gray.
And what do you think?
It just depends on what you, like you explained, Steve, what you're using it for. One thing I always like doing is blending the projections down into the atmosphere on stage. And a lot of that has to do with what you're coloring the floor with and how you're lighting the deck of the stage. I'm a real stickler about that. It has to do with color too, and mixing color on the floor and mixing color coming down off of the screens onto the deck. So if you consider the deck of the set as being another projection screen, that there could either be projections on that or your lighting is on that, you're projecting light on it, then that will tell you what sort of tonality you need for your screens. Also, how far back they are. Plus, we have, the new dark net, or relatively new dark net. I think it's been around for 5-6 years now, which is black too, but it has a very high reflectivity to it. So there are a lot of different options. So my suggestion is to talk to either Garrett's or to Rose Brand and get some samples and do your own tests and see what works for you.
I used to worry about this, and I know enough to be dangerous. So I think the answer is to get yourself a really good projection designer like David or somebody else like Zach, or so somebody like my colleague Michael Clark at UF who knows about this stuff, and trust them. I've read the Daylight screen catalog. I've looked at the Rose Brand stuff. They love the Jarrett stuff. I just think I'm better off not dabbling in that. I will just call an expert like you guys.
It's beyond your pay grade, as they say. There's a lot of things beyond mine.
I think you have to know when you're not the smartest guy in the room. And when it comes to that, I am not the smartest guy in the room.
And that's why Ken Billington got to where he is, because he was probably the smartest guy in the room, but he also knew how to make phone calls.
Right, exactly right. So I would call you or Steve or somebody at Jarrett's or I might, like if I was doing a broadcast spot, let's say somebody came to me and said, can you do like a broadcast studio? I would be calling Dennis Size. like that. He'd be on my speed dial, okay?
That's right.
Because you don't want to get in trouble making believe you know something that you don't.
That's what I did. That's how I got into television.
See, that explains everything.
That does. And this is why I'm not doing television anymore.
There you go. There you go.
Well, the rocking sounds of the Luminoids tells us that once again you've spent another morning listening to our casserole of nonsense, Light Talk.
We should invent that. I like that. Casserole of
That's
nonsense.
right. You can hear our show on Spotify, iTunes, Google, YouTube, LiveDesignOnline.com, Amazon Prime Music, and just about every other podcast site out there. Check out our website on lighttalk.org and be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our podcast. That way you will not miss a second of Light Talk Insanity.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast. However,
let me just remind you, we have a lot of lawyers in Florida. So if you decide to litigate, the law firm of Flex, Flock, Flair & Claire and their paralegals, Snoot, will defend us until our retirement funds are depleted.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from Long Beach, Gainesville, and the Republic of Texas.
And be sure to join us next week when we chat about more useless things and explore the crazy shenanigans in our industry.
And the Casserole, Light Talk, broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge wrapped in a casserole and humor around the world.
So we'll see you all next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Light Talk.
Sayonara.